Ready? No? Huh? Okay. If you would turn to 1 Samuel chapter 26. Last time, I believe it was last time, anyway, we saw where, or maybe it was the week before, we saw where David and Saul kind of sort of made up. Saul had come into the place where, the cave where David was hid out, didn't know David was in there, David and his men. David spared Saul's life. He had an opportunity to kill him, and he didn't. Now, we found out towards the end of the last chapter, after all that, David, of course, had a problem with a man named Nabal. Nabal was not a kind of person and not very friendly, and talked pretty rough to David's messengers that he sent to him. And then we saw where Nabal had a feast at his home and got drunk and died. The Lord took him. Not sure how he died. They didn't tell us all the details there. We don't know if he died from his drunkenness or if he died from something else. But it just says that the Lord smote him. The Lord killed him. And his widow, Abigail, very beautiful woman, a good woman, it appears, at least morally good and seemingly wanting to do right, and seems to have been a godly woman. David takes her as his wife. And then it's kind of a strange story there, because we don't find out till the end of that story that David's no longer married to his first wife, Michal, Saul's daughter. He's no longer the son-in-law of Saul. While he had been out on the run from Saul, Saul had given her to another man for a wife. And so David married Abigail and married another woman. Ahinoam of Jezreel. So he's got two wives now. He started out with one. She's been given to somebody else by her father, and now he's got two wives. We don't know anything at all about the second one, the lady, the woman from Jezreel. Don't see any details of her at all, other than her name and how, and that she is one of David's wives now, well, along with Abigail. Tonight, and we get into chapter 26, David's going to spare Saul's life again. Remember, David, all this whole time that Saul has been trying to kill him, David seems to understand that he's not the one that's going to kill Saul. That's not God's plan for David to kill Saul. And David is, over and over again, has tried to show Saul respect as the king. He's honored him, as he's let Saul know even that he thinks that he is Saul's most honorable servant. And Saul still hates him, all because of jealousy. It goes all the way back to the story of David and Goliath. That's where it started. When David killed Goliath, and the people in Israel began to praise David more than they praised Saul, Saul was jealous. And that's where it started. We also know that Saul has an evil spirit that the Lord put on him. This evil spirit didn't come to Saul by himself. The Lord put him there. And I think that's more proof, what we've studied before in Job, and maybe some other stories we've looked at where, even the devils know who the Lord is. When our study in Matthew and in Mark last year, we studied Mark, and we see where when Jesus went to cast demons out of somebody, those demons knew who he was. They knew he was the Son of God, more so than the Jewish priest. We know from the telling in Job where Satan himself has to go before God to seek permission to do anything in this world. He cannot touch one of God's children without God's permission. All the other things that he does, it appears as though Satan has to have God's permission to do anything. And so this evil spirit that has come upon Saul, and it seems that this evil spirit comes and goes. When David would play music, the evil spirit would leave. But then there would be times later that he'd come back. And the times that he's back, and the times that you can tell the times that this evil spirit is on Saul, that's when he acts the most wicked. That's when he does the most crazy things that he does. He's out of his mind almost. And that's how a person who's possessed acts. Look at the ones in the New Testament that Jesus cast out. Look at the people that they affected, that they possessed. The men there in the tombs and that we just studied about in Matthew. They were running all over the place in the cemetery and harassing people and scratching and clawing each other and biting each other and themselves, and they were just out of their minds. And when the Lord cast those demons out and those people come back to their right mind, they were a totally different person. They cleaned up. They went and proclaimed Christ to everybody they met. Now in 1 Samuel chapter 26, verse 1, and the Ziphites came unto Saul to Gibeah, saying, Doth not David hide himself in the hill of Hachilah, which is before Jeshimon? Then Saul arose and went down to the wilderness of Ziph, having 3,000 chosen men of Israel with him, to seek David in the wilderness of Ziph. Now, if I remember right, David's got, about 600 with him. So he's still heavily outnumbered. But, before Saul had 5,000 or 6,000 with him at one time. He scaled back some. And Saul pitched in the hill of Hachilah, which is before Jeshimon, by the way. But David abode in the wilderness, and he saw that Saul came after him into the wilderness. David therefore sent out spies, and understood that Saul was come in very deed. Now, the last we heard about these two, it seemed as though they kind of sort of made up, didn't it? At least that's what we thought. But Saul's back at it again. He hasn't stopped. And David arose and came to the place where Saul had pitched. And David beheld the place where Saul lay, and Abner the son of Ner, the captain of his host, and Saul lay in the trench, and the people pitched round about him. So Saul that's how they protected the king. It says in the trench that he was down in a low spot in his tent or whatever he stayed in, and his elite group was camped out around him to protect him. Then answered David and said to Amalek the Hittite and to Abishai the son of Zerah, the brother of Joab, saying, Who will go down with me to Saul to the camp? And Abishai said, I will go down with thee. Now remember, these men are with David. And remember who David had with him. These men were basically had been declared outlaws in the land of Israel. You know, they were men who owed money. They weren't, you know, murderers and thieves, nothing like that, but they owed people money. They weren't able to pay their bills. They were destitute. Some of them might have even been homeless. They were not the best of citizens, but they had taken up with David to help him fight Saul. And so you see men here that you wouldn't normally see with a king or a man of God even. So David and Abishai came to the people by night, and behold, Saul lay sleeping within the trench, and his spear stuck in the ground at his bolster, but Abner and the people lay round about him. Then said Abishai to David, God hath delivered thine enemy into thine hand this day. Now therefore let me smite him, I pray thee, and the spear even in the earth at once, and I will not smote him the second time. So this Abishai is willing to walk in there and kill the king, kill Saul. He's going to take the spear of Saul's that's in the dirt there. It's good. And that's kind of an odd thing. You normally, if you have a weapon or a tool, whichever, that has a metal blade, you don't bury it in the dirt. That's the wrong thing to do. You used to see people take an axe and bury it in the dirt when they were working, cutting trees down or whatever. And that ruins a blade quicker than anything. People don't think about that, but the moisture in the dirt will cause the blade to rust. And so Saul has done another unwise thing here. He's put his spear with the point down in the dirt. But this man is willing to kill him for David. He said, I'll do it once. I won't have to do it twice. It'll just take one hit, and it would be over. And David said to Abishai, destroy him not, for who can stretch forth his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? In other words, David said it would be murder. We can't do that. What happens, even in our country, if a person assassinates the president? It's murder, isn't it? They're convicted on a capital offense, a capital felony offense. And it's the worst possible kind, usually. David's thinking the same thing. You can't kill the king. He was anointed by God. And David said, furthermore, as the Lord liveth, the Lord shall smite him, or his day shall come to die, or he shall descend into battle and perish. In other words, his death is going to be in the Lord's hands. The Lord has a time for Saul to die, and we're going to step back and we're not going to get in the Lord's way. The Lord's going to take care of this. The Lord forbid that I should stretch forth mine hand against the Lord's anointed. But I pray thee, take thou now the spear that is at his bolster and the cruse of water, and let us go. So again, David is going to have proof that he was there. Remember what he did in the cave? He cut off part of Saul's skirt just to prove to him that, hey, I could have killed you, but I didn't. So David took the spear and the cruse of water from Saul's bolster, and they gat them away, and no man saw it, nor knew it, neither awaked, for they were all asleep, because a deep sleep from the Lord had fallen upon them. Again, we see the Lord's hand in this. David couldn't have done this on his own, not without the Lord's help. Humanly speaking, the way these men were laid out around the king, somebody would have heard something. They very possibly would have had sentries posted to guard through the night. But what happened? A deep sleep from the Lord had fallen upon them. They had all fallen asleep. Then David went over to the other side and stood on top of a hill afar off, a great space being between them. And David cried to the people, and to Abner, the son of Ner, saying, Answerest thou not, Abner? Then Abner answered and said, Who art thou that criest to the king? And David said to Abner, Art not thou a valiant man? And who is like to thee in Israel? This Abner was one of the great warriors of Saul's army. He was the man who led the troops under Saul. Wherefore then hast thou not kept thy lord the king? For there came one of the people in to destroy the king thy lord. This thing is not good that thou hast done. As the Lord liveth, ye are worthy to die, because ye have not kept your master, the Lord's anointed. So he's putting the blame on Abner here, where it should be. Remember, he's in charge of the troops. He was the one who was in charge of Saul's security. And it was his men that were under him included, that fell asleep. And David tells him, in words that a gallant man from Israel would understand, he's the Lord's anointed. If he'd have been killed because of you not being on watch, that's just as bad as you killing him. And now see where the king's spear is, and the cruse of water that was at his bolster. And Saul knew David's voice, and said, Is this thy voice, my son David? And David said, It is my voice, my lord, O king. David still is showing respect to the king. And he said, Wherefore doth my lord thus pursue after his servant? For what have I done? Or what evil is in mine hand? David's trying to, this is at least the second time that we know of, that David has tried to get Saul to tell him what he had done. Why are you chasing me? Why do you seek my death? Now therefore I pray thee, let my lord the king hear the words of his servant. If the Lord have stirred thee up against me, let me accept an offering, or let him accept an offering. But if they be the children of men, cursed be they before the Lord, for they have driven me out this day from abiding in the inheritance of the Lord, saying, Go serve other gods. Some pretty serious accusations here from David to the king. He tells him, if it's the Lord that stirred you up against me, if I've done something to offend God, tell me what it is, and I'll make an offering. I'll offer an offering, a sacrifice to God, a sin sacrifice. That's what he's asking for repentance. But he says, if this is because of man and not of God, notice he says, cursed be they before the Lord. If you're chasing me and it's not because of something the Lord has told you to do, you're going to be cursed. You're going to be cursed not by David, but by the Lord. And basically what he's done, he's driven David out, and he's not permitted to come back into the land to worship God. Now remember, the temple hasn't been built yet, but they still got the tabernacle. David is not permitted to come and worship. Not as is commanded in the law. And David's saying basically what you're telling me is I've got to go serve other gods. I can't serve my God anymore. Now therefore let not my blood fall to the earth before the face of the Lord. For the king of Israel is come out to seek a flea, as one who doth hunt a partridge in the mountains. I'm nobody, he says. I'm just one of your humble servants. I've never done anything wrong to offend you. compares himself to a flea or to a partridge, something very small. You know, why are you going to, and look at the expense. You know, we hear, today we hear the expense. I can't remember how many billions of dollars it's costing our military every day over there in Iran. I heard a few weeks ago, I can't remember what the number was, but it was in the billions of dollars. And you can think about Saul. He's got 3,000 men with him, and they're traveling. They're not sitting in one place and waiting for David. They're traveling, chasing him. So he's not only does he have to pay his troops, but he's going to provide food for them and for their animals. If they've got animals with them, which you would assume they did, they had to have pack animals. So this was not a cheap thing to be doing. And it's all because of jealousy from Saul towards David. Then said Saul, I have sinned. Return, my son David, for I will no more do thee harm, because my soul was precious in thine eyes this day. Behold, I have played the fool and erred exceedingly. And David answered and said, Behold, the king's spear, and let one of the young men come over and fetch it. The Lord render to every man his righteousness and his faithfulness, for the Lord delivered thee into my hand today, but I would not stretch forth mine hand against the Lord's anointed. And behold, as thy life was much set by this day in mine eyes, so let my life be much set by in the eyes of the Lord. And let him deliver me out of all tribulation. So we see Saul try to repent of what he's done. He's begging David to come back. David is letting Saul know that I could have killed you today. I could have killed you while you slept. I've got your spear here to prove it. That's how close I got. Then Saul said to David, Blessed be thou, my son David. Thou shalt both do great things, and also shalt still prevail. So David went on his way, and Saul returned to his place. So again, kind of the same thing we saw the last time. David spares Saul's life. They have a heart-to-heart talk afterwards. Saul repents. Is his repentance true? It wasn't the last time, was it? We'll have to wait and see till later, won't we? But David and Saul separate. They split again. They go their separate ways. It says David went his way and Saul returned to his place. Notice he went back home for now. Next time, we'll pick up with chapter 27. And we'll see more. David goes to live with the Philistines. Remember, he went and visited the Philistines once before, and he got scared and left. This time he goes and stays a little longer and lives with them for a time. So we'll pick up with chapter 27 next time. That's all we have for tonight.